It was a bright afternoon when Elijah stood outside the lawyer's office, gripping the funeral program of the woman who had raised him. He wasn't ready to fight. He was ready to mourn. But when the lawyer read the will aloud, Elijah's name wasn't mentioned. His heart sank. His biological siblings, Karen and Adam, exchanged knowing glances. The lawyer simply said, "I'm sorry, but Elijah, your name was not included in the will." But Elijah could feel something was wrong. Something wasn't right. Elijah wasn't the type to remain silent. He had been just 6 years old when he first stepped into the Whitaker home. A shy boy, carrying a second-hand backpack, his eyes full of caution. He learned early that silence kept him safe, that the world around him could change in an instant. But when he met Olivia Whitaker, everything changed. She was different from the other families he had stayed with. Olivia didn't rush to hug him like the other foster parents did. She knelt down, looked him in the eyes, and softly said, "You're safe here, Elijah. You're home now." For the first time in his life, Elijah believed her. The Whitaker family lived in a neat suburban home, with a white picket fence, weekend barbecues, and Sunday pancakes. It seemed perfect, but behind closed doors it wasn't always that simple. Karen and Adam, the Whitakers' biological children, saw Elijah not as a sibling, but as an outsider. From the very beginning, Karen and Adam made it clear that Elijah wasn't truly a part of their family. They acted as if they were doing a favor by letting him stay. It started with small things: Karen refusing to share her toys, Adam making sure Elijah knew which photos on the wall didn't include him. Even at school, they introduced him as the kid we're fostering. Elijah never argued, never fought back. He just tried harder to fit in, to be useful, to be good enough. Olivia always saw him. She was the one who slipped an extra cookie into his lunchbox, who sat beside his bed at night, reading stories until he fell asleep. She constantly reminded him that he was loved, that he mattered. And it wasn't just words. Olivia made sure Elijah knew that no matter what happened, he was a part of this family. She told him, "You don't have to worry, Elijah. I've made sure you're taken care of, just like Karen and Adam. You're my son, too." Elijah never questioned her. He never asked for her money or her possessions. What he wanted was the assurance that he had a place in her heart, that he wasn't just another name on a piece of paper. As Olivia's health began to deteriorate, the atmosphere in the Whitaker house grew tense. The once lively home became eerily quiet. Karen and Adam started visiting less often, and when they did, they didn't focus on their mother. They were more concerned with her assets. Elijah stayed by her side, helping her with everything. He brought her favorite soup when she couldn't eat, read to her when her voice became weak, and helped her get comfortable. He was there when she needed him most. One day, as Olivia struggled to sleep, she whispered to Elijah, "Can you install a small camera in my study? Just for peace of mind. I think some things are going missing." Elijah didn't question her. He just agreed to help. He installed the camera, not knowing that this small act of service would be the key to uncovering a betrayal that no one could have imagined. The day Olivia passed away, Elijah stood at her funeral, maintaining a composed facade. But deep inside, he could feel the weight of her promises. He knew she had loved him, and he believed she had kept her word about taking care of him. But as the lawyer, Mr. Carter, began reading the will, everything changed. Elijah's name was nowhere to be found. The will was split between Karen and Adam, but there was no mention of him. "I'm sorry, Elijah. Your name isn't in the final will," Mr. Carter said, glancing at the siblings, who barely contained their smirks. Elijah felt a cold, sinking feeling in his chest. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate. His mind raced, and then it clicked. His mother had made him a promise, and now he had to figure out how to keep it. As he sat there, listening to the lawyer, something in his memory stirred. A week before Olivia's passing, she had asked him to install that camera. It wasn't just for her safety. It was for him, too. Elijah didn't argue or protest. He simply nodded, standing up with quiet resolve. "Thank you for your time," he said. Later that night, Elijah sat in his room, staring at the laptop screen. He logged into the hidden camera feed, unsure if anything had been recorded. Then the screen flickered to life, and there it was, the footage. The footage showed Mr. Carter entering Olivia's study, rifling through her papers, and replacing a document with another. Elijah felt his pulse quicken as he realized the truth. But what shocked him most was that Karen was standing right behind Mr. Carter, silent, watching as the papers were switched. Elijah's fingers trembled as he downloaded the footage. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a conspiracy. And now, he had the evidence. The next morning, he walked into Mr. Carter's office. Without hesitation, he placed the flash drive on the desk. "What's this?" Carter asked, trying to maintain composure. Mr. Carter's face paled as Elijah leaned forward slightly. "Before you watch that, I suggest you think very carefully about the last time you were in my mother's study," Elijah said calmly. Carter's hand hovered over the flash drive, but his eyes flickered with uncertainty. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his voice trembled. Elijah didn't move. He simply stood still, eyes locked on Carter. "You told me you were only following orders, but I think you knew exactly what you were doing," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. After a long, tense pause, Carter exhaled sharply and looked down at the desk. "What do you want from me?" he asked quietly, defeated. Elijah placed the flash drive on the desk with a soft click. "I want the will corrected. I want the truth to be heard. If you don't fix this, I'll send that video to the authorities. All of them," he said firmly. Carter's eyes darted nervously to the door. "You can't do that," he muttered. But the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. Elijah leaned back slightly, letting the silence sink in. "I'm not asking for justice anymore," he said, his tone even. "I'm demanding it." Carter swallowed hard, looking like a man trapped. He had no choice but to nod. "I'll fix it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Elijah didn't smile. He didn't need to. "Make sure it's done correctly. And if you try to tamper with anything again, I will destroy you." As Elijah left the office, the weight of the situation settled over him. It was a victory. But it wasn't the end. The truth was out. But the fight wasn't over yet. The next morning, in the conference room of the law firm, Elijah was ready. He stood at the far end of the polished table, the truth now his weapon. Mr. Carter and the Whitaker siblings sat across from him, still unaware of the storm about to hit them. Karen scrolled through her phone, and Adam tapped his foot impatiently, expecting the meeting to be a mere formality. Elijah reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the flash drive. He placed it on the table, the weight of it heavy between them. "I have something to show you," he said quietly. Mr. Carter's face turned white as he recognized the drive. "No," he whispered, panic creeping into his voice. Elijah pressed play. The first video started, showing Olivia speaking directly into the camera. "This is for clarity," she said. "I want my estate divided equally between my 3 children. Elijah is my son, too. He deserves his share." Gasps filled the room as the footage shifted. It showed Mr. Carter rifling through papers in Olivia's study, swapping the original will with a new one, and Adam standing silently in the doorway, watching. The room went cold as the truth became undeniable. Karen's eyes widened in shock, and Adam stood frozen, speechless. Elijah didn't need to say anything. His presence, the video, and the evidence spoke louder than any words could. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mr. Carter stood up, his face pale. This is a mistake," he stammered. But Elijah remained calm, unmoving. "The only mistake here is trying to take something that wasn't yours to begin with." As the video finished, 2 uniformed officers stepped into the room. Mr. Carter's fate was sealed. As Mr. Carter was escorted out of the room by the officers, Elijah turned to the Whitaker siblings. Karen's face was a mixture of shock and disbelief. Adam's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. This can't be real," Karen muttered, her voice shaky. "You've destroyed everything." Elijah remained silent for a moment, allowing the weight of the situation to sink in. "I didn't destroy anything," he said calmly. "I'm just making things right." Adam finally spoke, his voice low and full of resentment. "You always thought you were better than us, didn't you? Always acting like you deserved more." Elijah's eyes hardened as he met Adam's gaze. "This isn't about being better. It's about doing what's right." Karen stood up, her voice rising. "So, what now? You're going to take everything? The house? The company? The inheritance?" Elijah shook his head slowly, his tone unwavering. "Number, I'm not here for that. I'm here for the truth. I'm here to make sure she gets what she deserves." Adam stepped forward, trying to intimidate Elijah. "You're making a huge mistake, Elijah. This isn't over. You've just started something you can't finish." Elijah didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, almost cold. "I have already finished what needed to be done. The rest is just consequences." The tension in the room was palpable, but Elijah stood firm. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway as the officers left with Carter. Karen and Adam exchanged glances, both realizing that their world was changing and they were powerless to stop it. "You'll regret this," Adam muttered under his breath, turning away. Elijah watched them leave, his resolve only growing stronger. The battle was far from over. As the door clicked shut behind them, Elijah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation lift slightly. But he knew the hardest part was yet to come. The truth was out, but now he had to make sure the people who had wronged his family would face justice. As he turned to leave the conference room, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "We need to talk. Meet me at the old mill tonight." Elijah paused for a moment, uncertainty flickering across his face. He hadn't expected this, but one thing was certain. Whoever this was, they had information, and Elijah was going to get to the bottom of it. Elijah sat in his car, staring at the message on his phone. The old mill. Why there? It seemed too suspicious, but he didn't have a choice. He couldn't ignore this. The streets were quiet as he drove through the darkening town. His mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. Who could be behind this? Who knew about the video? The old mill had been abandoned for years. Once a hub of activity, it was now a forgotten relic on the outskirts of town. Elijah parked his car a few hundred feet away, his eyes scanning the area. As he walked toward the mill, the silence was deafening. The only sound was his footsteps echoing on the cracked pavement. The air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the distance. Elijah froze, his body tensing. The figure was tall and cloaked in darkness, but he could make out the outline of a familiar face. "I knew you'd show up," the figure said, stepping into the dim light. It was Julian, an old friend from his past. "Julian?" Elijah said in disbelief. "What the hell are you doing here?" Julian smiled faintly, his eyes dark and calculating. "I have information. Information that could change everything for you, Elijah." Elijah's instincts told him to be cautious, but his curiosity got the better of him. "What information?" he asked, his voice sharp. Julian stepped closer, his face serious now. "You think you've won. You think the video is all you need. But there's more, Elijah. Much more." Elijah narrowed his eyes. "What are you talking about?" Julian looked over his shoulder, ensuring no one else was listening. He leaned in closer, his voice low. "The will you found, the footage you have, it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a bigger player involved, someone you didn't expect." Elijah's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" he demanded, his voice rising with urgency. Julian hesitated, then spoke slowly. "The Whitaker family isn't as innocent as they seem. There's someone higher up, someone who's been pulling strings from behind the scenes." Elijah's mind raced. He had known the Whitakers were shady, but this was something else entirely. "Who?" he repeated, his voice low but insistent. Julian's face grew darker. "It's someone close to you, Elijah. Someone you've trusted all along." Elijah's blood ran cold. "No, it can't be." Julian nodded grimly. "Trust no one, not even the people you think are on your side." Elijah stood still, the weight of Julian's words sinking in. His mind was reeling. Someone close to him? Who could it be? "No, you're lying," Elijah muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "It can't be anyone I trust. Not my friends, not—" Julian cut him off, his voice cold and firm. "You think you know them, Elijah. But there's a side to people you never see until it's too late. Trust me." Elijah was about to speak again when a car engine revved in the distance, growing louder. He looked up, and a black sedan pulled into the abandoned mill's parking lot. A man stepped out of the car, tall, with a cold expression, and a walk that betrayed years of authority. Elijah's blood ran cold as he recognized him. "No way," Elijah whispered. "It's him, Richard Whitaker." Julian noticed Elijah's expression and smiled darkly. "I told you, Elijah. It's always the ones you least expect." Richard Whitaker was one of the most influential men in town, a real estate mogul with a reputation for ruthlessness. Elijah knew he was no stranger to dirty business, but this was different. Elijah's heart was pounding. The revelation made sense now. Whitaker had been pulling the strings all along, using people like pawns in a game he controlled. "What does he want?" Elijah asked, his voice tight with anger. "Why is he involved?" Julian shrugged, a sad smirk on his lips. "Power, Elijah. What else? He controls everything, and if that means eliminating someone like you, then so be it." Elijah clenched his fists, his mind racing with possibilities. He couldn't let Whitaker get away with this, not after everything he had been through. He stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. I won't let him get away with it. I've come too far to stop now. Julian watched him carefully, then nodded slowly. I figured you'd say that. But be careful, Elijah. Whitaker isn't a man you want to cross. He's always 2 steps ahead. I don't have a choice, Elijah said, his resolve hardening. He tried to erase my mother's legacy. Now it's time to take him down. As Richard Whitaker approached the mill's entrance, he looked straight at Elijah. A cold, calculating smile crossed his face. I've been expecting you, he said, his voice smooth as silk. Elijah stood his ground, his eyes unwavering. The game's over, Whitaker. You've been caught. Whitaker's smile didn't falter. You think so, Elijah? You really think you can win this one? Elijah's gaze was like steel. I don't think. I know. Elijah's eyes remained fixed on Whitaker, his voice calm, yet carrying an undeniable edge of certainty. You've made a lot of enemies over the years, Whitaker. You're not untouchable. Whitaker's expression hardened, his smile fading into a thin line. You think you can bring me down with threats? With your empty promises? Elijah stepped closer, his voice dropping lower, almost a whisper. I'm bringing you down with the truth. Whitaker laughed, but there was no humor in it. The truth? What truth, Elijah? The truth that you were always just a pawn in this game? That your mother's name means nothing in the world I control? Elijah's gaze hardened, his jaw clenched. You may control the world, Whitaker, but you'll never control me. You never understood my mother, what she really stood for. Your mother was a fool, Whitaker spat, his voice dripping with contempt. She trusted the wrong people. And now she's gone, and so is her little legacy. Elijah's eyes flashed with anger, but his voice remained steady. You're wrong. She knew exactly who she was leaving her legacy to. She knew what I'd do to protect it. Without warning, Elijah reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. He placed it on the table between them, his eyes never leaving Whitaker's. This is proof of everything you've done. Whitaker froze, his gaze shifting between Elijah and the flash drive. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Elijah said, his voice now full of conviction. You think I didn't know about the documents you swapped? About the deal you made with my own brother? Whitaker's face turned ashen, his eyes narrowing. You're bluffing. Elijah smiled, a small, knowing smile. You're the one who taught me how to read people, Whitaker. I know exactly what you've been up to. The tension in the room thickened. Whitaker reached for the flash drive, but Elijah stopped him with a single motion, his hand still outstretched. Not yet. Not until you watch it. The lawyer hesitated, a flicker of fear crossing his face, but his pride wouldn't let him show it. With a forced calm, he plugged the drive into the computer. The video started, grainy and unclear at first, but slowly the truth began to unfold on the screen. Whitaker's face paled as he watched himself switching the documents, handing the forged will to a shadowy figure. Elijah could see the moment when everything changed, when Whitaker thought he had won. That's you, isn't it? A man who thinks he can just erase people's lives for his gain? Whitaker's lips trembled, but he said nothing. He couldn't refute the evidence. Not now. I've seen enough, Elijah said coldly. You're done. With that, Elijah turned and walked out of the room, leaving Whitaker to face the consequences of his actions. As Elijah walked out, he felt the weight of the moment. It was done. Whitaker had been exposed, his empire on the verge of collapsing. The drive in his pocket felt heavier now, the evidence of everything Whitaker had done resting in his hand. Outside, the cold air bit at his face, but it didn't matter. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The city stretched out before him, a landscape of steel and glass. But for Elijah, it was more than just a city. It was the battlefield where he'd fight for justice. "You've come a long way," a voice called from behind him. Elijah turned, recognizing the figure standing in the shadows. It was his brother, Matthew. Matthew's eyes were sharp, filled with both concern and something else, an unspoken understanding. "You know what happens now, right?" Elijah nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. Whitaker's power is over, but we still have a long way to go." Matthew stepped forward, his gaze steady. "You'll need more than just the evidence to bring down the rest of them, the ones still hiding in the shadows." Elijah's mind raced. His brother was right. The network of corruption was vast, and Whitaker had been just the tip of the iceberg. "I know, but I'm not stopping until every last one of them is brought to justice." Matthew studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good. But you'll need allies, people you can trust." Elijah looked at his brother, a silent promise passing between them. "I already have a few in mind." "Just be careful," Matthew cautioned. "This fight is far from over, Elijah." Elijah turned away, a determined look in his eyes. "I know, but this time I won't be fighting alone." The days following Whitaker's downfall were filled with tension. Elijah spent every waking hour organizing the evidence, reaching out to the right people, and making sure everything was in place. But he knew the fight was far from over. The deeper he dug, the more layers of corruption he uncovered. Whitaker was only one piece of a much larger puzzle. He couldn't do it alone. Elijah needed allies, people who understood the stakes, people who could stand by him as the battle raged on. One evening, he met with an old friend, Sarah, who had once been a lawyer. Sarah had left the field years ago, disillusioned by the corruption she had seen. But Elijah knew that she still had the fire in her. "I can't promise you anything, Elijah," Sarah said, looking him in the eye. "But I'll help. We're not in this for revenge, right? We're in it for justice." Elijah nodded, grateful for her words. "Exactly. This is about making sure the people who have been hurt get what they deserve. It's about making things right." Sarah leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful look on her face. "We'll need more than just legal knowledge. We'll need support from the community, from those who've been silenced." Elijah's eyes hardened. "We'll get it. We're not backing down." Sarah smiled, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. "You're different, Elijah. I'm in." As they shook hands, Elijah felt the weight of the fight shift. He wasn't alone anymore. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, research, and planning. Elijah and Sarah formed a small team, gathering evidence, connecting with whistleblowers, and putting together a strategy to take down the network of corruption once and for all. But as the team dug deeper, they realized just how far the corruption ran. Whitaker wasn't the only one involved. Powerful people from every level of government, business, and law enforcement were part of the scheme. "We need to be smart about this," Sarah warned, pacing around the room. "We can't just go after them all at once. We have to hit them where it hurts, one step at a time." Elijah agreed. They couldn't rush into it. This needed to be calculated, strategic. Every move had to be precise. They spent weeks building their case, slowly, carefully collecting the information they needed, Every lead, every document, every witness was crucial. Finally, the day came when they were ready. Elijah stood in front of a crowd of reporters, his face calm but resolute. Today marks the beginning of the end for the corruption that has plagued our city. Elijah began, his voice steady, his words carrying weight. The reporters were silent, waiting for him to continue. Elijah looked out at them, a slight smile crossing his face. "And we will not stop until justice is served."